Hello, and welcome to the Todd and Taylor Show. It's a coffee and comic book movies morning. I'm Todd A.
I'm Taylor Trask. Hey, hey, hey. Hey, hey.
So we're trying a little experiment this morning, huh?
We're live. We're on video now because I was like, why? People should not only hear our voices, but also see us to understand what we go through.
Right.
Go ahead.
Right, and not only live, but on video, both.
Mm-hmm. Well, we're doing more to boost our YouTube channel. And so it's twofold. It's trying to do more. We're actually going to load up all of our past episodes onto YouTube. But we also wanted to do, it was silly because I think more people want to watch us or at least have an access to a YouTube link. So like we're sitting here, why not just hit record and see how it goes? And slowly we'll make this all behind us. This will all be better.
People hate SoundCloud. That's what
they kind of, I mean, maybe at least people who listen to us don't like SoundCloud anymore or never did. So I don't know. This is good. And I like being able to see you. I think it adds to the dynamic a little more. You know, we've got our little studio set up. So why not do it on camera?
Yeah. So we've been doing this for a few weeks with Coffee and Comics. What are you drinking this morning?
Well, Todd, this morning, I've actually brought my own brewing after a couple weeks of sampling other people's wares. I have little espresso machine at home. So I took, it's from a Black Hills roaster. I forget the actual name, but it has the word snake in it. And I did just a single shot because Jesus God, it is strong. So I made my own little shot, and then I put some whole milk in it. And that's all I've got. Nothing too fancy, but it's sure working.
I mean, that qualifies as a latte, right?
It does, or an Americano, I guess, because I just kind of haphazardly threw the milk in. I didn't steam it or anything. I could have.
Oh, okay. Good call. Yeah.
Wanted to get out the door.
I went fancy and went to Phil's this morning. As you know, I'm generally pretty pedestrian in my coffee tastes, but I did the classic mint mojito at Phil's.
Mint mojito, really?
Yeah,
that's a spring drink, Phil's. What are you doing?
It's iced.
Day.
It's I don't know. It was probably in the 50s. No, I'm saying it's 64 right now. That's I don't know. I'll tell you though, beautiful drive up Pacific Coast Highway to get this. So clear, you could see Catalina. It was lovely. It was a good thing to do on a Sunday morning before I record a show about Thor Ragnarok, which we have not even mentioned yet.
Yeah, that's what we're doing. We're doing a show. This will be a special edition of Coffee and Comics. We don't have any books today. We wanted to take a moment and talk about Thor Ragnarok because it's the first of the big holiday movies, essentially. I mean, this is the holiday season. We've just passed into the darkness of daylight savings time going away.
I know. Yeah. Where do we start with this? I think let's start with the theater, of course. Like, how did you see this? 2D, 3D?
I saw regular 2D at my usual.
Yeah.
When I usually have one or two theaters I go to, either Alamo Drafthouse, as we've talked about before, or there's this new theater down the road from my studio that it looks kind of like a Chinese theater. It's got like the facade in front, but it's just a regular AMC, but every single seat reclines back to where you're basically lying on your back, like watching this movie. So I love going there for just like the casual hang. If I wasn't really interested in food or anything, I'm sure Alamo had a really awesome pre-roll like they usually do. But no, I went there, leaned way back, was sitting pretty close in front, so I was able to take it in. It feels like an IMAX movie when you're just like, you're basically just seeing it like above you. So did that. Didn't really want to. I want to wear my glasses, so I didn't really want to do a 3D or an IMAX. How about you?
I did IMAX 3D. I was just sort of looking for the right way to see it. That was not actually the way I wanted to see it. But I don't know. I just me. I generally my my outlook on movies is see it as big and fancy as possible. So normally IMAX 3D would be exactly what I want. But for some reason, I just thought I think I want to see this in 2D. I don't, or if at least if I was seeing IMAX, I kind of wanted to see the IMAX 2D version.
Is there such a thing as IMAX 2D?
Yes, there is. In fact, in the same theater where I saw this, but they were alternating, and it was just like, if I want to see it before the huge crowd on Friday night, I got to do the 3D one. because the 2D was the 7 o'clock, you know?
Okay.
So, and then actually the theater around the corner from me is doing one of those Dolby Atmos showings in
What is
2D.
that?
That's isn't that what you told me about Blade Runner though, with the super like sound system, the Dolby system in the
Yeah.
theater?
I think, I mean, I didn't
Um,
see the word Atmos. Maybe that's just like, no,
oh, okay.
I just didn't know if it
That's
was
how
like,
it's listed on Fandango.
do you
So
get to smell it too? Like it's
like
all around you. And like, there's just like a little,
that
perfume.
garbage planet that they're on.
Oh, Jesus.
um,
Can you imagine?
uh, yeah, so that's that. I think the next time I see it will be the Dolby Atmos showing.
Mm.
That's my goal. But I would, I don't know. I was a little ambivalent about 3D, and usually I'm pretty into it. So I guess as that comes up as we talk about it, I'll maybe I can clarify what was wrong with 3D, but I don't know.
Yeah, well, that will probably come up a lot because that I actually thought for a hot second, maybe because of all the sort of CG I was watching in the trailers, maybe I should see it in 3D. But anymore, I feel like if it can't work as a 2D movie, like unless it's like Avatar or Tron Legacy, where you're like, oh no, we basically built this from scratch to be a 3D experience, or Coraline to some extent. Like I feel like unless it's that, it should work as 2D, and then if it really works, then go and see it. See it additionally if you need to. But I was pretty pure, pretty 2D, and I don't know. Do you want to jump right into our initial thoughts, or do you want to give yours in full first? I have mixed thoughts, so I don't know.
Yeah, and we should we do this? We didn't discuss this first. Should we do it like spoiler free, and then I don't even know how not to spoil it.
Exactly. I don't think we can do this without
it's
spoiling.
Like, it's not like there's like twists and turns that we're gonna spoil. It's just everything. We just got to talk about the whole movie in full. So if you,
let's do that. Let's do that. We'll probably, and let's go in chronological order. So then at least as we get closer to the end, because I think the most spoilerific stuff is at the end. It for me, it's more how it ties into the rest of the MCU and especially Infinity War.
That'll be good because I missed any post-credit sequences.
Oh, really? You didn't stick around? Todd, that's Marvel rule number 1. You stay until the very end, and then even like after the final one, you wait until the clock comes up that shows how long they have to reset the theater before the next crowd comes in. Once that starts, then you can leave, but not until then.
Sorry for the too much information spot here, man. I peed for like a solid 3 minutes after I like ran during the credits. I was trying. I was almost there, man. I almost made it. But anyway.
Good. I can give you that whole spiel then.
Yeah. So actually, maybe. Well, we'll see. Anyway. Where do we start? I mean, I love that it started. I want to start at the very beginning because it was something I noted about the trailer, which was and it was someone else's comment that I thought was funny about how, wow, this Thor trailer, months ago, literally started with, so you're probably wondering how I got here. And then to have the actual movie open up that way, I just thought was really funny, to have him.
Yeah. I'm gonna say one thing out of the box though. I feel like, and this isn't necessarily a critique on this movie specifically, although this movie, I could definitely feel it more so than others. But I feel like we've entered into this dangerous territory where they have gotten too freewheeling with the trailers, especially showing it's twofold. It started happening in Spider-Man Homecoming where like they would show shots, and movies have done this here and there, but like there's this intentional thing now where they shoot scenes or do CG backplates for the trailer that never appear in the movie, or they show you too many of the main things from the movie, so like too many of the main jokes or too many of the main like just really cool sequences. So then you see it in the trailer. I have seen so many. And yeah, those Thor Ragnarok trailers, especially the SDCC one, the one that came out during Comic-Con, was amazing. But I almost feel like if we hadn't seen that, some of the movie would have felt a little fresher and a little bit more. But otherwise, it was just almost like, I almost wish I had a scorecard to be like, oh, there's the trailer scene. There's the trailer scene. Like it just, and I feel like Justice League is going to have the same problem where they're just like giving us way too much. And it's like, I'm going to know the whole movie before I even go.
We should have backed up. I should have taken us to the trailers that we saw.
Yeah,
because I think I think the Justice League trailer I saw was mostly a trailer I'd seen before, but I swear there were like a couple things different.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it actually reduced my excitement for that movie.
Hmm.
Like every other and I think part of it is kind of what you're describing. I think from the to me the Ragnarok trailers were successful in that it totally raised my excitement for the movie.
Yeah, of course.
Justice League, I think, is totally running into that problem you're talking about, where now I'm kind of able to piece stuff together, and I just think like I don't. You're doing the opposite, you know. The Last Jedi trailer, on the other hand, I thought was great. Like I you know, I was very excited for that. The New Mutants trailer, I'm pretty interested in.
I didn't get that one.
The Pacific Rim trailer, whew, man, that was pretty cool. Yeah, I hadn't seen anything on the Pacific Rim Uprising.
Oh, really? That was the first one you never seen? Oh, interesting.
Yeah, I just hadn't really paid attention. I just didn't want to. So this one was the first one I really caught. And
I didn't get a New Mutants one. I did get the Black Panther one again. And also, it's the same thing. It kind of
still looks like. Yeah,
we'll see. Well, here, let me. I almost feel like I need to disclaimer quite a bit here, because like there's the fact that trailers now have gotten way too freewheely, and I don't know. It almost feels like studios are going, well, they're showing a little bit more than normal. I think in the case of Ragnarok, all the music from the trailers was in the movie, so it's like even that, like that happened with Suicide Squad too, where it's like it's like the music, I almost feel like the trailer should be a singular experience, and I shouldn't hear like, don't use your same songs, don't use your same kind of your flow and your moments. Don't give me basically the movie in 2-minute form in the trailer. So there was things in Thor Ragnarok that would have felt a lot better and more fresh if I didn't know like that like that, whatever that song is. I think it's like a Led Zeppelin.
It's called
song.
The Immigrant Song.
Yeah. If that hadn't been in the in the trailer, that would have felt so much more amazing in the movie. But it's like, oh well, there's that song. It was there's too much of that going on. And I also feel like, and this is probably a bigger discussion to have separately, but like I feel like I noticed this last year with Doctor Strange, where I was like, I wonder if the Marvel formula has either gotten too formulaic or we're too used to it. And it almost feels like some of these, since Doctor Strange, I'll even throw Spider-Man Homecoming in it too, where I'm just like, man, maybe it's just being around these characters or just this genre for so long, but I'm like, I kind of want a little something different. And I just kind of feel like we're in this mode now where they're just like, it's like a little paint by numbers. It's like, we got this villain and this thing, and this is going to happen, and they're done. Like, it's the same thing, you know? And
I would say, sort of in their defense, but also that backs you up, is that there seems to be every few years kind of a new tone for the movies. And so, you know, the first 2 Iron Mans and then Captain America and then sort of the first Avengers all kind of fit a tone. And then Ant-Man and Guardians and maybe Spider-Man and Thor kind of fit a tone. You know, it's sort of like they're in their silly tone now. And I agree. Like, it's kind of a thing we've seen. I don't know. I think Ragnarok stands on its own.
You know, it does,
just because of the attitude about the characters.
But I feel like I went to see Guardians of the Galaxy 1, and it was a very different tone that we'd seen before, but there was something about it that felt really like I didn't get that from Guardians 2. Like, Guardians 2 was fun. I know you loved it especially, but like there's something about that first one where like, oh wow, this is where we are now. And I feel like they just kind of, once they lock in on that, they just run it until somebody else has a better idea. And now maybe Black Panther is that better idea that we'll see in February. I worry though that Black Panther is going to be a lot of the same beats, the same kind of shots. It almost feels less like we're seeing independent movies and more like episodes of a TV show writ large on the screen, you know? And it's just like,
I'd rather watch this TV show than The Defenders.
Well, yes. Yeah. Talk about that.
I think Black Panther is going to be a return to sort of a serious tone of movie. Whereas like, I feel kind of like Ragnarok was a great culmination of, here's a ridiculous superhero movie, you know, in the theme of Guardians and to some extent Spider-Man Homecoming and Ant-Man. So I'm ready for that Black Panther to be like, this is a serious action movie, you know, with a very different setting, at least in Wakanda. So
let me ask you this, just to tee this up a little bit more, because I'll come out with this, just my kind of top line sort of thought, because I think that will permeate everything else I say. I felt like Thor Ragnarok, as excited as I was to go and see it, I felt like it was ultimately for me a good first draft. Like there was a lot of stuff that I'm like, oh, that's cool, that's cool, that's cool. But between like the script and especially like the CG, I'm just like, man, this needed another month or two. Like I just felt like there was so much about it, and maybe that was intentional. Maybe it was like, oh no, we're gonna go for sort of a more 90s, like, you know, sort of less, you know, like kind of looser, more indie vibe. We're just kind of, but at the same time, that betrays some of the Marvel, like, oh no, we've spent this much money to show you this. I don't know. It had that feeling to me. And then the other side of it that was really hard for me to kind of wrap my head around was Ragnarok was supposed to be this like apocalyptic, like the most serious thing that could ever happen to Thor or that part of the MCU. And they made the intentional choice to really make it as lighthearted as possible. So I really had a hard time squaring like this imminent doom, this terrible thing with, whatever, it's okay. Like, what tell me about your day, huh? And it's like, and that there's nothing wrong with that approach, but I feel like maybe, I don't know. Putting those two things together, and especially when we start in the beginning, you know, he meets like the actual character who was going to cause Ragnarok. And it was just like, they really treated it really flippantly. So then I was like, well, clearly that's not the guy who's going to, you know, destroy Asgard. And this is just some throwaway scene. And it turned, you know, at some point that guy comes back around again. So I was just like, there's a lot of that going on. And I felt like if you focus only on that choice, should they have made this the one movie should they have brought Taika Waititi in for this movie when it was it should have been you should have felt a lot more agency. You should have felt a lot more like, oh my God, these people are all gonna die. Like that's kind of a weighty thing in my mind.
There was definitely like a weird sense of stakes in this for sure. Yeah. I mean, that was one of the good things about the all the trailers and sort of their over delivery of information was that I kind of got what the tone was going to be. And then I was comfortable going in, like it wasn't a shock, but someone really had to save Thor and Hulk from themselves. You know, the Thor movies just didn't do a great job of like rounding out that character. And in the Avengers movies, they had a tendency sometimes to just look like puppets of the other Avengers. But, although in Ultron, like I really like the Bruce Banner, Tony Stark conversations. It just didn't seem to like end up anywhere, you know. It was anyway. I think Waititi definitely saved those characters from becoming too serious or becoming just the props of the Marvel universe, like the strongest Avengers or whatever. But but you're right about the stakes, because especially when you think about how the Ultron movie has informed so many other movies like Civil War and I mean, they even bring it up in this one, like and I guess you could say to some extent like Homecoming, but it's the events in, what is that place called? The Sokovia.
Oh yeah.
But was it Sokovia? Was that the city that they dropped from the sky? I don't know. Anyway, that was those are really, really scary stakes, you know. And this one seemed to have the same sort of stakes, like Asgard is going to be destroyed, but I didn't feel that danger of like, I don't know. I got a lot of questions about Asgard actually. I having read I'm no Neil Gaiman by any means, but I've at least read the Norse myths. So I think the average American, you know, has read the Greek myths or something and maybe doesn't know anything about the Norse myths. I didn't know there were peasant folk living in Asgard. I don't know how else to say it. The common people. I thought Asgard was only the home of the gods and goddesses. So there was this moment where it was like, I don't know, couldn't they have made a movie and not called it Ragnarok?
Yeah, well, that's just
exactly the same movie.
Yeah, well, I think that's, and maybe it's heightened for me because after seeing Wonder Woman, you know, where they're like, oh no, the mythology is, we're gonna embrace it. It's not gonna be like, oh, these are like ancient people who confuse science and magic. It's like, no, these are the Greek gods created these people, you know, these women, these Amazons to help save mankind. So Wonder Woman took the mythology very seriously, and then they built in all the lighthearted stuff around that, right? So it was like there was all those wonderful moments of just, especially when you throw Chris Pine in. It's like, oh my God, he is just a walking charm factory. So like you're gonna have all of that going, and I wish maybe that's what I expected from this, where it's like, oh, there's gonna be the Taika Waititi, edge and moments and sort of indie fun and comedy, but like maybe the mythology is gonna be much more grounded. And I especially thought that when you saw that amazing looking sequence of the Flight of the Valkyries coming in, on their horses, and Hela's like, the slow motion, like, stuff going on. Like I saw that, I'm like, oh shoot, I actually thought the movie would start with that as like a flashback, as this like amazing, like, here's how Hela was imprisoned, or how she, something more along those lines. And to see that almost as like a throwaway scene where Loki's like, what happened to you? Oh, interesting. Like, that's where it really started to go off the rails for me in terms of like, what are they doing? What is the whole, like, are they going to treat this seriously or not? And then when you actually get Hela, and she doesn't really have anything to do other than like, just kind of, she wants to rule. And that's basically it. A lot of that felt like they took this amazing, like this should be the most pivotal moment of the the Marvel galaxy. And they're just kind of like, yeah, it's cool.
Well, I can't, it didn't necessarily diminish my enjoyment of it, but isn't this like the problem that every Thor movie has had? Because the first one, it seemed really goofy that these Asgardians could just sort of teleport to Earth.
Yeah.
Like we'd never, they've never interacted with anyone, and now they're here. And there's this Asgard that we're supposed to care about. And then in the second one, they went way hard into like myth and elves and dark elves and Malekith and all that kind of, and you're like, this is, I way too far in the other direction. At least I enjoyed it, but it was not that right balance of like a superhero movie. It was just watching, like a Lord of the Rings kind of movie set in present day America. And then, to a great extent, like I like it when they just make comic book movies absurd. But you're right. It did, but for Cate Blanchett's like amazing performance, I don't know that Hela had like all the motivation we're seeing from Hela is due to her performance, not due to like some great storytelling or something. I loved her flashback. I mean, I think that telling of like how Odin has changed all this history was great. There's definitely in the especially in like a recent run of Thor in the comics, like Odin is a giant asshole. He is in the Norse myths all the time. Like Odin is he's not a Zeus or a Jesus or like a benevolent god. Like Odin is a fallible, vainglorious jerk. And then there was a weird sort of treatment of him as like a frail old man or something. It's all like when we meet Odin, before we realize it's Loki disguised as Odin. Actually, that turn really worked for me. That sort of reveal, because I was like, that's Odin. That's how Odin acts in the comics all the time.
See, as soon as they showed him, I'm like, well, clearly, because we know Loki was posing as him after Thor 2, after the Dark World movie. So it's like we knew that. Yeah, because like it ends with him like sitting on the throne, and like after he and Thor, Odin, quote unquote, and Thor have this like moment. Thor says, "No, I still don't want the throne." He goes away, and then like he shimmers, and like it's Loki's face.
Oh,
so they always like
wipe that movie out of my brain.
I actually am not loved, but I really liked Thor: The Dark World. Like,
I did too. It was sort of like a popcorn movie. Like it didn't really sit in canon.
But like there was even like that was a movie that had a lot of moments of levity. Like when they're like all like in the final third act, which is like a cataclysmic thing in London. They're disappearing and reappearing everywhere. Like there's that scene where he appears in the tube and he's just like, God damn it, and he has to like get out and run back into the battle. Like there's a lot of moments like that. Yeah, I agree. There was a lot of the Dark World that was just kind of overbearing and tedious. But it still had like, it had that. I think for me, Thor has to be grounded, much like Wonder Woman, it has to be grounded in some serious mythology. And then you layer the funny on top of it. I think the Dark World was, they made the decision. They're like, well, let's not worry about that mythology stuff. Let's just have all these like fun moments. And I'm like, then that's fine. Like, I like those moments.
You mean Ragnarok?
Ragnarok. Yeah, yeah. There
Yeah.
needed to be something more. And let's just call it spoilers now, because I think we have to talk about this aspect of it for anything else to make much sense. And spoilers about everything. I came into this movie, we know there's this one, and there's Black Panther, and then there's Infinity War. And up until this point, they've done a fairly good job, especially earlier on. They've done a great job about introducing the Thanos threat more like at the end. It's with the exception of Guardians of the Galaxy 1, where she shows up mid-movie. But they've done a great job of threading that through at the end, so that you're like, while all this other stuff's going on, this sort of slow-moving ship is getting closer and closer and closer, and we only see it through the back end. And it seems like in the last couple ending sequences, like we haven't really gotten anything. So I thought, okay, Ragnarok and Black Panther have got to be the natural stair step, and probably Ragnarok more than anything has got to really tee up the events of Infinity War. And it does not at all at any time. And even in the post credits, like there's one thing in the post credits that might sort of kind of be about that, but at no time do you get any sense that like, oh, Hela is going to be like, and the entire time I'm thinking, oh, Hela's going to be she's going to be the stand-in for death, that Thanos is going to try to do all this to impress, like in the comics or in the, in some of the animated series, death is either this statue that he's constantly trying to, make come to life because he's in love with death, or she's an actual, character who talks and walks, and, he's in love with death. And I'm thinking, well, if Hela's the goddess of death, and we haven't seen him like talking to any statue in like some post scenes, maybe somehow Ragnarok will lead into that. There'll be some kind of good connective tissue, and there just isn't at all. So I'm thinking, okay, if you're not gonna connect this to Infinity War in the slightest, then at least make it feel more like, okay, if it's gonna be a standalone Thor movie, I really want to feel those stakes a lot more. I want to feel like if they're gonna destroy Asgard, if they're gonna, if Hela's gonna just cause havoc, I need to feel like, oh, these characters, we've seen Asgard a few times. I need to feel the weight of that, but I didn't care at all. I didn't have any empathy or any stakes mentally in any way. I just was like, at the very end, I was like, okay, like there's nothing about it that made me feel like, oh, that's too bad. It just, I don't know why. Maybe. Well, go ahead.
I love this because this is a this is such a geek conundrum. And you have actually said in past episodes where we've talked, you've said, I think Hela's going to be the death stand-in Ragnarok. And I just didn't really, I never connected these two things, but I guess that did you go into this movie? I mean, you went into this movie really expecting like, we're going to get the middle sequence between Guardians and Infinity War, right?
I thought it would be a half Thor movie, half Infinity War setup that would be much more apparent at the end. Like I thought whatever Hela was doing was probably almost like a red herring. Like, oh, she's doing these things, but like what it's really going to end up in is this massive connection point between, and maybe like even like down to the fact that we haven't seen the soul stone yet. I think that's the only one missing. Like we've seen the other Infinity Stones revealed. I think the soul one, the big yellow, the big, the big one right here is like the only one missing. I thought, well, maybe maybe Heimdall has that because he can see everything, or maybe Odin has that when he dies, like that's revealed or something, and we didn't even get that. Like there's just nothing. It was disappointing. So I tried to suspend that as much as possible because I'm like, well, okay. But then what we ended up with was, in my mind, just kind of a weak Thor movie. And I'm just like, in terms of the story, and I'm just like, so if they're not going to connect it, I could at least forgive a weaker Thor movie if they're going almost Iron Man 2 style, if they're really trying to connect this together. And I know a lot of people hate Iron Man 2 for that reason. It was too connective. I actually didn't mind it. I actually thought that was necessary to get us a sense of a bigger game evolving, which is why I think when you get to Avengers, you need Iron Man 2 to get to Avengers. Like you need that connective tissue to be brought up, to be talked about, fleshed out a little bit, so that when you get to Avengers, you're like, oh, we're ready for this. So Avengers was a really satisfying movie because all these things kind of built up. We're not getting there with Infinity War. So I feel like Infinity War is just going to happen, and it's going to be more like a standalone movie. And we're going to be like, well, why does all this why does all this matter?
This is so interesting to me. So I must have seen like an interview, or not watched an interview, but read an interview with Taika Waititi where he said something about how what did he say? It was something about how this would not, like, Thor was not going to, I don't know. I just remember him saying it's a standalone movie. Like, it's
Mhm.
not going to be part of the Infinity War, whatever. And
Mhm.
so I went in thinking it's not really connected to the other Marvel movies except for sort of how they get here.
Mhm.
And then what we saw in that bootleg Infinity War teaser trailer from, uh, it wasn't, I don't think that was San Diego Comic Con. I think that was the Disney,
Oh yeah, the Expo
yeah. Um, where
D2 or
Thor,
whatever they
like
call it.
it opens up with Thor like landing on the Guardians ship or
Yeah,
something like
yeah,
that.
yeah.
So I guess I thought maybe this would end in a way where that's what the next thing that happens. But
Exactly.
I went in
Yeah.
thinking this isn't going to connect at all. And so I really enjoyed, maybe that's why the stakes, like why this all worked for me, even though, despite the weird stakes. But that was because I saw it at so many moments as like, this is a 1970s, 80s Thor story.
Mm-hmm.
And this is that, it almost worked more for me than like, say, Batman versus Superman, where there's world ending stakes that are strangely solved, like that. That's my
Yeah.
big, obviously my big problem with all world ending stakes is like it always just accelerates too quickly.
Yeah. Yeah.
But this one, at least the world was Asgard,
Mm-hmm.
and there wasn't sort of a fourth act at the end of like what happens to all those Asgardians.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
um so yeah, that's really interesting. Just that perspective of how we both went into the movie really informed um, how we thought of it during that. I'll go back to just to like bring up a couple moments. There are a couple of cool shots that are just like horizontal side to side shots where one of them, like Thor is flying, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
What's the other one? But they were just such cool like comic book panels, you
Mm-hmm.
know. And oh, and then definitely the one where he's in the very Tron looking chair as he's being led to the game master or whatever his name is.
Mm-hmm. Grandmaster.
Grandmaster. Yeah, yeah. And and it's just sort of like perfectly horizontally scrolling with these really cheesy Tron effects. I thought that was
Mm-hmm.
great. Like that was perfect comic book
Mm-hmm.
Jack Kirby looking chair.
Well, yeah, then, but just even in terms of like the execution as like as a scene, it really good. Like they're able to play the humor, and then the fact that like when they reveal that he's just been sitting there the whole time, just
Yeah, yeah.
this is all sort of a hallucination. Just that there was a lot of moments that were just awesome, and a lot of moments honestly reminded me of What We Do in the Shadows, or his other Taika Waititi's other movie, where it's just like this could have been a low budget just YouTube sketch that this just happens to be there. It's in the movie, but it just was really kind of nice and felt just really at home with that. So it's almost like he was, in my mind, he was juggling wanting to do this kind of like smaller movie with this like big budget and expectations that it's got to be this big thing. And it's like I actually, the first thing I thought of after I was driving home, I'm like, you know what? I feel like if I was Kevin Feige, I would have done one of two things. I either would have made this an anime and just had everybody just voice themselves, because I feel like there was so much. And the reason I say that, there was so much just bad CGI and just really bad green screen work that I thought, why not just if they wanted to go all out weird and just make this a totally different experience, keep the script exactly as is, keep everything the same, just have the same actors voice themselves, but intentionally make it an anime movie. So then it's all the same. It all feels, the continuity feels the same. And then it would just be that one Marvel movie that's like, oh, wow, that one was an anime one. That's kind of fun. Either that, or I feel like so much of this should have just been like single one-off sketches on YouTube or something that, in place of a movie, they could have just directed like 10 of these like little sketches, and you would have had maybe like a comics tie-in to tie it all together or something, just so that I wish if they would have made more of an intentional decision and not try to make it all, fit in the spectacle of a 2-hour movie. I don't know. There's so much. Maybe it was the fact that the green screen work and so many of the shots were just straight ahead. Like the camera was just like, put the camera right in front of the actor and just do that. Like there was so many of those moments combined with the green screen that maybe that threw me off. I just didn't feel like the world was real enough. Maybe if they had gotten further in or moved the camera a little bit more, but there's so much of it as I was going back through in my mind. I'm just like, so many, like, put the camera here, at the set, like almost like it's a play, like it's a theater. You know, you're just pointing the camera at the stage, you know, and just letting it go. And I don't. That's not really appealing to me. But I think again, to build the reality or to build, you know, to feel the stakes, I gotta feel like I'm in the world, and I just never had that as much.
I wonder if I also wonder if your perception of that would have changed if you had seen it in 3D, especially about like saying that
Maybe
the CGI looked a little janky. And I wonder if mine would have changed as well. Cause I was thinking like, oh, actually, I think this would look really great if it were all flat, like even, you know, like artificially flat. I think that was one of the cool things about like that Thor, the chair scene where he's meeting the Grand Master is, it looked so much like a comic book, like there was no third dimension, you know? So that's really interesting. There was also because to some extent, I think you're exactly right on a lot of that. There was a huge, I think it must have been like a New York Times profile on Taika Waititi, and yeah, I just Googled it, and it's like where they were, you know, in the editing bays and stuff with him, sort of going through process. Like they got, you know, the writer got to visit him on set, and then later during post production and stuff, and there definitely was a sense of they just did a ton of pickup shots and then or not pickup shots in the sense that they were afterwards. They just had so much footage that there would be times where they're like, yeah, can you make it so that his hand is right here during that punch? And they could just sort of move the screen and animate the CGI the right way that he wanted it. So there definitely was
that's problematic
a lot of that going on.
Well, the most glaring one, and I've seen other people talk about this in comment sections on various sites. The most glaring one is that scene where he throws the hammer and Hela catches it and it blows up. In every trailer, you go back, that is in a dark alley in a city. All of a sudden, now we're in a field. And it's especially clear when like Odin, Thor, and Loki are standing there looking out at the ocean. It's the fakest looking bullshit you've ever seen. It's worse than Jar Jar Binks. Like the plate, like the shadowing, the shadowing, and I'm serious. The shadowing and the color on them is completely different than this like kind of hokey looking background. And every time they're in that field, I'm like, oh, this was clearly shot in one location. They had like cut them out, and like even the cutting out like of them, it's like you can see some like kind of blurring on the edges. I was just like, how did that get through the editing process? Was that like a last I mean, were they doing that literally 2 weeks ago and they just had to get it out? Because usually a lot of times they're working on these things up until like I think a week before, because then they have to do their prints and stuff. Like, was that the case and they just had to swap it in? And if so, why did they move it? You know, and I'm wondering, maybe that was originally meant to be, you know, they showed that shot of the retirement home having been bulldozed down.
Yeah.
Maybe that was supposed to be at an actual retirement home. And then the alley behind it is where that fight scene was supposed to happen. And they just, because it just looked really bad. And I actually love the look of it in the alley. Like that was such a cool looking shot. You know, it's dark and she's just there, you know?
I definitely noticed that hammer shot was different from the trailer, and I couldn't figure out exactly why. And it looked so much more shocking in the trailer. Like it, and, you know, part of that's just the trailer was cut really quickly and had the Zeppelin song under it and all that kind of stuff. But I definitely felt like watching it in the movie, like, it doesn't even, is it not dramatic because I've already seen it? Or now that you're saying that about the setting, I agree. I think you're right. That's what changed. I'll point out something else, because the demolishing, that looked really bad. Like when they're on the street watching the thing collapse, and Loki looks like he just joined Depeche Mode. That was so weird. Like watching that, I don't know, the demolishing of the retirement home was really hokey looking. But now that you say that, I'm wondering, did they change that whole setting and encounter with Odin just to fit in a Doctor Strange cameo?
Yes.
Because he's the one that tells him he's in Norway.
Yep. That has to be it. And I wish.
And it's almost more interesting now to think about, like, what if Odin were in the retirement home and all those conversations were in an American retirement home? That would be more poignant, I think.
Yes. Ugh. And then maybe when they're standing looking out at the ocean, I would have imagined, like, well, clearly that must have been them looking out the window at like New York or something, you know, like, or because a lot of what, notice that the conversation, he never says like this field or this is the place of our ancestor, or, you know, of our Earth's ancestor. It's just like, it's very ambiguous kind of dialogue. So and a lot of it's actually, you don't see them saying it. So there's a lot of shots of them looking with their backs turned towards us and you're just hearing dialogue. So I'm like, was that just ADR to be whatever this, just more ambiguous? I don't.
This kind of bums me out because I think we're onto something.
Yeah, well, it's like, and that Doctor Strange sequence, while a little amusing, was kind of just like a rip off of that Dark World sequence where they're constantly, every time they touch the Aether, they're being zapped around London. Like, and that was we've kind of seen that. I'm just like, do we really need, like, and Doctor Strange does it. It's the same. It's literally the stinger at the end of Doctor Strange that we saw at the end of that movie last year where he's talking to Thor. It's that same thing, but with a lot of bouncing around. And you just get the sense that, so that Stephen Strange shouldn't be that skilled just yet, but that's a minor technicality. Like, it's weird. Like, last time we saw him he was still learning the ropes and kind of, getting a little bit better. So the fact that he's all like, mysterious and confident now, I'm like, oh, I mean, okay, fine. But just, we didn't need it. Like, him telling Thor, or Loki for that matter, like where Odin is. Like, I'm like, did we need this 10 minutes when we could have had the fights, the hella fight scene in an alley, which again, looked really freaking cool,
And that's a bummer too, because it makes me think, well, did Taika Waititi write, a really like funny but touching reunion between the two sons and Odin, and then Marvel came in and said, we really want a Doctor Strange cameo?
I think so.
So refresh my memory, we've seen the Doctor Strange refilling Thor's beer gag before. Was that in one of the hidden scenes or post trailers scenes with Doctor Strange, or was that in a trailer to Thor?
No, that was after the end of Doctor Strange. We saw that that particular scene, and it wasn't like, I'm pretty sure, because like in the Captain America one, the end of Winter Soldier, there was a stinger that then appeared in Civil War where he's got his hand in the vice. That was actually reshot for Civil War because some of the dialogue didn't quite match up, but it's the same scene. In this case, I think it's literally what we saw at the end of Doctor Strange was literally the same scene that we saw here. I mean, everything looked exactly the same,
This is one of those things I would just love to know the inside movie story on this. Like, I'll tell you, because like, did the Doctor Strange director actually direct that whole scene with Thor?
Mm-hmm.
And then Taika was the one who had the story and the direction of the old folks' home, and they had to put in that weird scene of Thor and Loki staring at the home being destroyed, and then cut to the Doctor Strange. I don't know. I really wonder what was going on there, because we've really hit on something that's a little out of place in this movie.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah, man, it's weird. I feel like I got to turn it around though, because I enjoyed so much of this movie, and we have not yet mentioned Tessa Thompson.
Yes, let's jump
Valkyrie, who
she was fantastic.
I loved every second of her appearance. I thought she was wonderful, and apparently I'm just an ignorant idiot. I must have seen work that she's been in before, because I was shocked afterwards to IMDb her and find out like she has this huge resume. But I mean, I just bought it. Like, I was like, oh, she's English or Australian with doing this English accent. I didn't realize this is an American actress who's done a ton of work here.
Well, I didn't recognize her from, she was in Creed, and Creed was amazing, but I didn't make that connection, because I was like, she's a little more buff and, in this, and she's she's much more of a sort of a weaker character in Creed. So I think maybe just that disconnect. I didn't realize it was the same actress, but she's also in Westworld.
And in Veronica Mars.
Yeah, of all things. So she's fantastic. I think she's definitely the breakout star here. They give her a character a lot to do. That's just a lot of moments where she can just be funny. She can be strong. She can be her own. She's not a character who needs Thor to save her at any way, shape, or form. In fact, it's usually the opposite. They never make her a damsel. They never make her like her. Even her sort of where she ends up at the end is more by her own choice. It's not like, well, Thor had to do this for her to live a happy life again. It's like, she's like, no, I'll just, we'll see what happens. And it just, she's kind of finding her way, which I think is great. I think that's, we've come a long way in terms of the female characters in these movies. And I think it's just yet one more step for Marvel to get to Captain Marvel, we can't get to Captain Marvel being her own fully formed character if we can't, we can't just go from Scarlett Johansson in Black, as Black Widow in like Iron Man 2 without these kind of this connective tissue.
Yeah. I totally agree. And just just having a drunk Valkyrie that's
Yeah.
been on this sort of trash planet as a scavenger for the Grandmaster was that was like a great way to twist the mythology.
Mhm.
And her, as I love your suggestion that the flashback that Loki induces, like if that had actually opened the movie, that would have been incredible. Like just do
Yeah.
that, run the title card, and then start with Thor in the cage. That would have been
Yes.
amazing.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
but but seeing that scene, I was just as excited to see that scene where it happened. Like that was such a cool backstory to reveal, her personal stakes against Hela and her sort of fall from, confidence, I guess.
Mhm.
Yeah, I love that character. I loved having her as the sidekick for Thor better than whoever those like four companions are that are usually with him.
Mhm.
Um, I guess there was, I guess, I don't know. I don't really know the story, but I know that the actor who played Lady Sif was not coming back. And I don't know if that was
Jamie
just like,
Alexander. Well,
they,
she's in a very popular NBC show right now, and they just could not get her
right.
scheduling to work out.
So I wonder if they would have had her and if she would have been one of the people, killed by Hela, right?
In a
When Hela,
literally in a throwaway scene, they had to bring Zachary Levi back as the new, because he wasn't one of the original guy with the kind of the Robin Hood looking guy. That was not him originally. It was the dude from Once Upon a Time. And then like in Dark World, they cast Zachary Levi as that guy. And so like when I saw them like in the Heimdall chamber, in the Bifrost chamber, I was like, oh, they're finally gonna, and like literally 2 seconds into that scene, both those guys are just gone. I'm like, oh, okay. I guess
I was totally fine with that.
I mean, yeah, because they don't serve any purpose, but it was kind of sad they didn't even get more. They didn't get more to do.
Done that in the first Thor movie, and I would have been like, cool. Let's get rid of these uninteresting sidekicks.
The Warriors 3, who we never see really do much except for in Thor 1. There's that. I guess there is that sequence in Thor 1 where they all go to fight the Frost Giants, and you get to see that. But yeah, it's interesting. They mentioned Lady Sif in the little play that they show that Loki has written that he's enjoying.
Right.
They mention her name, but there's never a moment of like, oh, she escaped the planet or where. So like she can never come back, right? It's just like we will never know what happened to her. She can't make some kind of like surprise return in Infinity War. Like it's unfortunate that they didn't even give her like well, she escaped before Hela could arrive, or she's off on a special mission or something that will never, just nothing, so.
It's a whole weird Marvel's treatment of those characters is just weird anyway. I don't care for him. I don't like the gang of Asgardians that Thor has. So I was fine with that. What about what about Idris as Heimdall?
I mean, I love Idris Elba, but like I just don't. It feels like he was just sort of, he did things because he had to. Like there was no scene where, like we get the sense early on that he has left his post, and that's why Carl Urban has been put in place. Carl Urban's I forget what his character the character's name. It's like
Scourge.
Yeah, Scourge. Like we never find out, like, and so like when it's almost like they just relegated Heimdall to like moving the plot forward, and less like what happened to him, like why did he wash out. Like there were so many moments that could have been explored further that they just were like, whatever. Like the biggest one for me was when and then this kind of goes, we'll come back to Heimdall in a second, but like the biggest one for me was the moment where Bruce Banner comes back and he's like, I have been the Hulk for 2 years. Oh my God. And if I become the Hulk again, you may not see me again. And I was like, oh wow, this is going to be a really meaty thing. And then we never address it. He just becomes the Hulk again like it's nothing. And there's never like
it's true.
He's going to become the Hulk again. He might lose him. It's like we just gloss right over that, And I just feel like there's so many things, Heimdall included, where they're just like, there could have been an amazing moment. Like why, like if we had delved further into why Heimdall is, kind of running behind the scenes and how he has to sort of be the leader for these people while Thor's gone or Odin's dead. Like we just never get it. There's just so many things could have been so much more meaningful. That would have all collectively led up to the fact that when Asgard is destroyed, that you should have felt like a tear should have rolled, and it never builds up to that.
That's true. I mean, I can't disagree with that. The Hulk scene was, it was so weird because he says it and then a second later he says it again in this like strained kind of, don't you get it? If I, I just told you if I turn into the Hulk, I might never turn back. And I, the way he says it the second time, I thought, but you don't know that. I mean, you're Dr. Banner, you have 7 PhDs. Like, shouldn't you test your blood out, do some work on this? Like, that's the whole Banner's whole thing forever through the whole mythology is like trying to figure out what's going on to him intellectually. It was, that was a kind of ham-fisted. Did you think
even a scene like where he had like an internal monologue with the Hulk where like you can see him like conversing with that, like maybe he looks in the mirror. I know this has been done before, but maybe he like looks in the mirror and sees like the Hulk's head staring back at him, and like he has like this like almost schizophrenic conversation where, and like the two of them, there's a scene. It would have been so much, and they could have done it very quickly. They didn't need like 20 minutes to do this, but they could have had little moments where when then he has to jump out and save the people, he like looks at you, maybe there's like a mirror, some reflective surface in the Quinjet or the ship that they're in. And he like, and the Hulk goes, we'll work together to do this, Hulk and Banner, work something that evolves that along. So when he jumps out, we could still have the funny like plop, which was actually, I cringed when he just hit the Bifrost bridge. I was just like, oh, geez, is he dead? Like, what happened? But just having something, there could have been a really like cathartic moment where like he and the Hulk agree. Maybe there's like this, like they reach out and they shake hands like virtually or something, where there's an agreement. So we know, okay, when he turns into the Hulk, like Banner will be able to come back. But instead we just get like, he's jumping out, he's doing his thing. There's so much more could have been put into that moment, or his relationship with Valkyrie, because he and Valkyrie, there was like a friendship there. Some more little subtleties could have been built around that. So she would have, we could have, she could have been the audience avatar, like, when he turns back into the Hulk and she's like, that reveal, that's revealed to her, and she could be like, and we, the audience, feel that same elation, but also we know that he's, Bruce will be back when he needs to be. Sorry, I'm just gonna. I don't want to ruin this moment at the movie. If you enjoyed the movie, great. Like, there was a lot of enjoyable things about it, but at this juncture for me, my expectations are a lot higher because we've got to move to Infinity War, which I feel has to the weight of Infinity War has to be felt throughout all these movies building up to it, and like all the little moments.
Like I said, I think that's such a great like geek perspective because, I'm not, I don't want to mischaracterize you. I think you're looking at it from like a purely story point of view. You're not, correct me if I'm wrong. You're not like a person who is demanding like the biggest, largest battle ever to entertain you.
No.
Yeah. And I'm looking at it more like I'm already anticipating that the biggest, largest battle movie ever is going to annoy me. So I would rather they just don't even do that team up and make like 10 more Ragnaroks or Ant-Mans that have stakes that are really only personal to that superhero. It's sort of, maybe that's why, despite me saying that like the stakes are weird in this one, maybe that's why it kind of worked for me because Asgard only matters to the Asgardians. Like, it's just, it doesn't, like, it's not an earth ending thing. That's what always bothers me about the Avengers movies is Tony Stark causes a problem that is going to wipe out all of humanity, and then the Avengers solve it, and then they pat themselves on the back, when all they need to do is like lock Tony Stark up or send him into outer space or something. So
problem solved, credits start rolling.
This was sort of like I don't know, but I'll tell you again, one thing that I don't know. Another thing about it is I didn't walk out of it thinking like it was a commentary on some real event. Whereas like Winter Soldier, Civil War to some extent, is like ham-fisted as a lot of that plot is, like they're trying to set it in a 21st century America surveillance state and have commentary on politics and and surveillance and security. This is just like, hey, you're in a mythological world.
But let's look at Winter Soldier, because like that for me is kind of one of the high standards or the high bars that I can kind of compare everything else to. Winter Soldier worked so well because and a lot of it, honestly, the plot of Winter Soldier is, at its core, is very similar to Ragnarok. He's ejected. Captain America is ejected from the system that he was in support of, that, supported him. He had to team up with another Avenger to sort of figure out how to undo that and expose that and actually restore everything to what it's supposed to be. So they go on this kind of adventure in the meantime, they're also trying to figure out, what's Bucky's place in all this. And it kind of becomes a little bit of a team up, movie, because, Falcon joins in. So similar kind of DNA. People will be like, well, I'm not talking about specific details, but the overall thematic kind of movements, very similar. But they spend a lot of time, like when Captain America and Black Widow go into that secret bunker and they learn about how Hydra has endured, and they go on and like that cat and mouse game with them, and then Robert Redford's Pierce character, just that slow reveal and slow movement, like it was moving towards something. So then at the end, when all the what do you call them, the ships, oh my god,
the
airships, what the hell is the name? Oh god, people are gonna be like,
oh my god,
screaming at us right now.
The big battleship with
when all the helicarriers rise up out of the ocean, like that moment feels like holy shit, because it's like you felt the stakes, and you feel like, okay, if they don't solve this, the world's going to be a drastically different place. And so even though that wasn't, the world wasn't exploding, just those helicarriers rising was such a pivotal moment for me. I feel like the destruction of Ragnarok, like at the end when Thor's like, oh, I know what we got to do. It felt so effortless. Like, well, we've got the helmets in there. That's how we'll beat Hela. And then she didn't even really put up a fight. She kind of, she tried to throw the stuff into the what's his name, Surtur, or whatever the demon's name is. Voiced by Clancy Brown, by the way, which is, I noticed that in the credits. I was like, oh, Clancy Brown. One of my favorite voice actors and actors of all time. But she just kind of like, I thought maybe after Asgard exploded, she'd still be out in space trying to torment them in one last, it felt so convenient. I was just like, everything happened because it had to, not because there was any kind of struggle or like just the plot just was so convenient feeling. By the time they, rolled off in their ship, I was just like, I don't care about this. Like when they saw it explode, it was almost played as a joke, because they're like, well, they even had that scene where Heimdall's like, and one day we shall come back and we shall live here. Or no, not Heimdall, the rock guy. He's like, one day they'll be able to come back, and then it explodes. And it's like, well, I guess not. And I thought these people, they just saw their homeland, their world die. Like that shouldn't be so convenient, and it was so played for jokes. I don't know. And maybe for some people it's like, that's not what I wanted. I wanted to see just a fun, and that's fine. If that's the audience and that's kind of the connection, that's great. But for me, I just felt like so many missed opportunities to build that and just make that feel more,
Yeah. I mean, like I said, I think everything about this is, because I really enjoyed the movie.
Yeah. No, that's totally fine.
I guess a lot of this, I guess I'm just sort of defensive because it's easy to, I mean, I don't think you're wrong about a lot of these plot mistakes and characterizations and stuff. And I guess I'm defensive on behalf of Taika Waititi, like, oh, well, but that's not really his fault, and I guess what I would offer up is there are a lot of problems with Thor and Hulk and Loki just as characters that have been built up in the Marvel universe. Mm-hmm. And Loki has he has the Tony Stark problem. Like Loki causes all these problems and then he is never really held accountable for them. Mm-hmm. And to some extent that just fits the mythology, the sort of, mischievous god. But you're right. Like these were pretty big stakes for the Asgardians. Again, I didn't realize there were so many common people on Asgard.
Yeah.
Ragnarok is really just the death of the gods. It's not.
We did see them. We did see them when Thor's mother died. I think they all came out. When they're doing the funeral ceremony, which is a beautifully shot scene. Lighting the lanterns. I think you saw a bunch of like just regular folk. Around there. And even in the beginning, remember in the beginning, Thor, when Thor's like coming in like, yeah, and he's like, there's like the big kind of celebration, which is, I think, supposed to be his coronation. There's just a bunch of, thousands of people had gathered. So I just assumed that, they were, but at the same time too, I didn't realize that they were just like regular peasant folk. I thought maybe, they'd all live in the city. Maybe they're all like somehow part of the apparatus that supports, Odin, they all sort of have a job, or who knows? What the one thing about I'll run through a couple things that I really did enjoy. Like I think anything that involved Taika Waititi directly as an idea or as an execution. So Korg, the rock character, who was voiced by him. It's funny. I thought he was voiced by Murray from Flight of the Conchords at first.
Oh, that's what I thought too.
It was Taika himself, which is once I
That
kind of
totally
like
makes sense.
listened to it a little bit, I was like, oh, that is him. But that character was awesome. It was right out of any of this, any of Flight of the Conchords episodes or what we do in the shadows. It was so him. And then just like the scene where he's, like you said, the scene where he's in the chair, going towards and like, you're about to meet the Grandmaster. And just like that whole thing was fun.
Everything with Jeff Goldblum. I love Jeff Goldblum so much more than Benicio del Toro as the collector. Like Jeff Goldblum, that was almost like I was actually afraid like, he's really just going to be doing the same thing that the collector does. Mm-hmm. But Goldblum did everything where I thought, no, that's what the collector should have been. He should have been this goofy. I mean, he acts like, he's so rich and he runs this planet and he gives these big holographic decrees for people to go capture them and stuff like that. But it's just this trashy planet. Yeah. Like he's not living in like, he's in luxury, but it's not like some wealthy world where they're these, I don't know, really well-off people or something. He's just lording over a bunch of scavengers.
You think about it, he said it, he's been there for like a million, millions of years, a million years. So it's like it makes perfect sense why he just gets to just Goldblum around. Like at that point, if somebody's been there that long, they're going to be a little bit crazy. They're not going to be all quite there. My biggest complaint about that is that I wish I didn't know it was going to be. I wish they had never mentioned Jeff Goldblum was in this movie.
That one shot where he appears, like close up on his face. If you didn't know it was going to be Goldblum, you would have shit your pants laughing.
Oh my God. And that's, again, it kind of goes back to where I was like, oh, that's because they build it up. They're like, you're about to meet the Grandmaster. And then like, if they just showed it and it's him and he's doing his thing, it's like, I just would have died. And the fact, so it's like they gave too much. Studios need to be a lot more cautious. I understand they're like, we need to sell this off of Jeff Goldblum. That'll be like, a lot of people talked about it, but because it was so familiar, it was more just like, again, just checking things off a list instead of like me being truly able to sit back and just you really enjoy like, oh my God, like just to be surprised and delighted, they could have cut a trailer that hinted at the Grandmaster. Like maybe you heard a voice that you couldn't quite pin down or something, but like if they could have kept that secret somehow. Because they kept Tessa Thompson's character, like her characterization pretty secret. Like you saw her in the trailers and she's this badass woman, but you didn't realize she was going to be like, kind of like a slobbering drunk,
Yeah.
Just
when
like,
she shows up. Yeah. That first scene where she shows up. Exactly. That is such a perfect example because, yeah, exactly. I just thought given the trailers that she was going to be just sort of like any nameless hero where she's, flying around and saving the day. And then to be introduced to her in the way that we were was really perfect. Mm-hmm. And then to see how that fit within her character of being, just depressed by this defeat at the hands of Hela. Like that's a big deal. Yeah. Would I feel like we should probably wrap up right around an hour right now.
Oh yeah.
Would you, despite your misgivings, would you say like, how do you rate this? What, would,
should I rate it against other Marvel movies or on its own merits?
Oh, rate it against other Marvel movies. Like, where do you put it in there?
Man. I would say
it should be noted that I am a huge fan of Ant-Man and you are not, right?
No,
or have you even seen it?
I actually, no, I finally did see Ant-Man. I actually really liked Ant-Man.
Oh, okay.
I think again, it was a little too paint by numbers, but Evangeline Lilly, usually I'm not a fan of her, but she was charming as hell in that movie. Like I really want to see, I'm going to see Ant-Man and the Wasp in the theater completely off of her being a main character in it. She's great. I continuously don't give her enough credit. So but yeah, I ended up really liking that. I would say this to me, again, while there were some really nice moments, I'm going to probably rank it probably in the if you kind of chunk Marvel movies in like one of three buckets, with like the first bucket being like, holy crap, that was surprising and wonderful, and again, Winter Soldier, the first Avengers movie, the first Iron Man movie, like that's probably one bucket. Then there's probably like that middling bucket of like, yeah, these are perfectly fine. I'll watch them when they're on. Not as great as those other ones. So like I would say Thor: The Dark World's probably in there. Like, I actually like that more. That one I liked more than most people. Iron Man 2 I liked more than most people. And then there's kind of like just all the other ones. And I'd probably put this in the all the other ones bucket. Like, where it's not terrible. It's not like, it's not like Suicide Squad bad, where it's just like, oh, Jesus. Like, why?
Right.
Why? It's not that. But at the same time, I feel like it really missed the mark for me for what it could have been. It could have been like one of the most amazing, epic, like just like a rocket ride or a roller coaster ride of emotions. And it just didn't take advantage of that for me. So I'll probably, and I would say also in that bucket are like Doctor Strange, which was pretty to look at, but it just was.
Yeah.
What's another one like that?
The Doctor Strange thing is a great one because I just recently rewatched that, and that was one where I sort of told myself I loved it in the theater, and then when I rewatched it, I went, I'm glad I didn't buy this.
Yeah.
This one, I think Ragnarok is better than Doctor Strange, but I do know that like when I came out of, and it's not as bad as Suicide Squad. It's not as totally senseless as Batman versus Superman, Bat Soup. I know when I came out of Wonder Woman though, I was like, I can't wait to see that again.
Yeah.
And then having said that, I often do that with superhero movies in a really mistaken way. Like when I came out of Ultron, I was like, liked it better than the first Avengers. And
really?
then I've actually never seen it again, but I've seen that first Avengers 12 times.
I would put Ultron in this third bucket, and I would put I was just thinking about it. Shoot.
I'm trying to think of it as like almost like it's hard to say because we've had two Guardians movies, but almost like this is the movie we needed for Thor to separate him from the Avengers and make him useful as like this enormously powerful, otherworldly being. Like this is kind of his Guardians, which is what we kind of knew it would be. But when I walked out, as much as I enjoyed the experience of watching it, I didn't have that feeling like that's an instant classic that is, really going to like sit with me for a while. So like I said, I'm definitely gonna go see it in 2D and probably in that Dolby Atmos theater or whatever. So I'll see how I feel like in a few months. Maybe it'll be like one of my favorites, or maybe it'll be a Doctor Strange where, I'm just trying to say I didn't have that like Wonder Woman feeling of like, I'm going to see this again right away.
And you really liked Guardians 2, and I would put Guardians 2 in that same bucket as well, where I'm like, I'm glad I saw it, but it didn't further the format for me. It didn't further the stakes of it. I mean, it had some great moments.
I get that. I think I appreciated the characterizations and the I think I said at the time, like, I just like the team in Guardians of the Galaxy. And maybe that's what I really liked about Ragnarok was I just liked having this, especially that they called it the team, the Revengers.
The Revengers, yeah. I will say this. I'll say this. I think I'm convinced that, again, if you take kind of my three buckets, this would have been a solid middle bucket where I'm like, yeah, I really like that. Like, it wasn't like as revolutionary as one of those first bucket ones, but it would have been much more solid for me had I not been spoiled by all those things in the trailer that were either confusing or gave me a different expectation, or again, like on the big side, like just revealing Jeff Goldblum was in it, but also like the music, like just if all of that was, if I knew very little, if this was like a Kingsman situation where like the trailer just kind of was and didn't really give you a really deep sense of what that movie was supposed to be, which was perfect because I went to Kingsman, as I've talked about numerous times, going, holy crap, this is not at all what I expected. It's 10 times better than what I even hoped for. I think this would have probably had a similar effect where I'm like, oh my God, like just the sheer imagination, unspoiled, would have been a little bit more potent for me.
They really had to walk a tightrope, I think, with that trailer, because they really had to announce to people, we know you didn't see the last Thor movie. This one's going to be different. But you're right. Like maybe they erred on the side of revealing too many of the secrets that for people who are going to see it anyway, like you and me, maybe it would have been better to surprise us with a lot of that stuff.
I'll tell you, I'll make another bold comparison. So that kick-ass Ragnarok trailer came out the same time as the Stranger Things 2 trailer, which was probably the greatest trailer of all goddamn time. That was something. But that Stranger, having just finished season 2, that Stranger Things 2 trailer, no spoilers, but just that trailer was amazing, but the series delivered so much more than that trailer could have ever given me. And like it went in directions that I'm like, oh shoot, this was barely even hinted at in the trailer. So it's like it is possible to have like a kick-ass, get excited trailer teaser and then have the story be its own thing. And I just feel like the trailers betrayed this movie way more than they should have. It just kind of gave me like I felt like so much of that movie for me was just like, okay, there's that scene, there's that, just checking things off instead of being truly like, oh wow, oh my god,
Yeah, like I said, I would tell everybody to go see this. I enjoyed it. I love the goofy Marvel movies, I guess.
Yeah.
So I think with that said, Taylor, unless we've left anything out, where can people find this podcast?
They can find this podcast on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Google Play, and wherever you enjoy podcasts. You can also find us on Twitter and SoundCloud. We are Find Us There. And of course, on our website is findusthere.org. And you can get all our other shows and other episodes of this show there too.
That sounds great. Maybe next week we can do Stranger Things season 2, because
we could, yeah.
About a third of the way into it. So.
Ooh.
Yeah. So tune in next week for Coffee and Comics, and we will see you then. Later, Taylor.
Bye-bye.